One thing I've learned about Sean Payton, he's ready to do a multi-hour TV streaming radio show because he's still going an hour into his press conference, and he seems to enjoy it. And as he said, he'd like to do TV. He thinks he'd be good at it. I know he'd be good at it. Some coaches would be. Some coaches wouldn't be. Sean Payton would be, and he may be doing that as soon as 2022, announcing today that he is resigning as the head coach of the Saints 16 years after he arrived. And he said he has no plans to coach in 2022. And as we know, Charean, plans can change all the time. But it sure sounds like he fully intends, plans, wishes to take the year off, and we'll see if that's what comes to fruition. But he made it clear he's not done. He's just moving on to a different phase, and he didn't close the door on potentially coming back to coaching at some point down the road. And if I had to bet, I'd say he would.
Yeah, and I would bet that he's probably going to end up with the Dallas Cowboys at some point, Mike, whether that's next year or the year after. But we'll see. Maybe he gets into this TV gig and really enjoys it, or does podcasts and really enjoys that. Whatever he does, as you said, he's going to be really good at it. He has a ton of options for whatever he wants to do. Hey, the world, he's got it. He can do whatever he wants to do. He's that good at everything in tells football. So he'll have choices. He'll have decisions to make about his future this year and beyond this year. We'll see what happens. But, Mike, I just think he was worn out. I just think this season truly wore him out after Drew Brees, and it was time. It was time to take some time off is what I got out of that press conference.
And you know what? It's the 10-year anniversary of the year he took off involuntarily as a result of the Bountygate scandal. Now, I watched much of the press conference. He hasn't been asked about it. I don't think he talked about it that year that he was forced out of the game. It was, I think, a travesty. I know they were doing something that they technically shouldn't have been doing, but everybody was doing it at the time. It was a cultural phenomenon, and the NFL chose to find one team, make an extreme example out of them in an effort to advance whatever agenda the NFL was trying to advance. It really cares about player safety, even though those kinds of things were happening all the time. That was part of the culture and the fabric of the NFL. But he may get to that at some point. He may still be talking by the time that we are finished. But 10 years after he was out for a year, he's going to be out for, I think, a year, at most 2, and he'll be back. He's 58 years old. He's got plenty more left, and I think that he'll be back. He'll miss it so much that he'll be back, and he'll pick the right spot for himself. He picked the right time to get out of New Orleans because it's not like they have a full cupboard of talented players that are easily fit under the salary cap with the prospects of pursuing a championship as soon as 2022.
Well, and Mike, when you look at it, you remember the movie Sliding Doors? One thing happens and it changes everything. I did this series one time on what if and changed a lot of the what ifs. What if the catch hadn't happened and things like that. You do think about a couple of things with Sean Payton. What if they had ended up drafting Patrick Mahomes? They were one pick away from that when the Chiefs leapfrogged them. They ended up taking Marshawn Lattimore with the 11th overall pick that year. But what if they had ended up with Patrick Mahomes? I don't think Sean Payton would be retiring this year. What if the 49ers don't come back and beat the Rams this year and the Saints get to the postseason? Perhaps they upset the Packers. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they upset the Cowboys. Who knows what happens at that point? Maybe he's still coaching the Saints if that happens. But so many what ifs. But you know what? I think this team this year, the coaching job he did might have been his best coaching job when you consider the hurricane that they had early, the COVID issues they had, starting 4 quarterbacks, the year after Drew Brees retires. They finished with a winning record and almost got into the postseason. A terrific coaching job by Sean Payton. He doesn't go out exactly on top, but I do think it was his best coaching job of his career.
And really, but for the comeback by the 49ers against the Rams, and he mentioned today he's actually rooting against the Rams this weekend because of that, because it was the Rams' collapse that allowed the 49ers into the playoffs. And frankly, the Rams may get their punishment this weekend for not beating the 49ers when they could. The Rams probably would have preferred the Saints to make the playoffs and be coming to L.A. instead of the 49ers. But, yeah, they could still be playing right now, and maybe he would have been rejuvenated by a playoff berth this year, and you go out and you reload and you try it again in 2022. But look, he has been one of the best coaches in the NFL. He exits as one of the highest paid coaches in the NFL, so it's a significant amount of income that he's going to have to replace, but we will not need to have any bake sales for Sean Payton. He's done just fine during his time in the NFL. Let's hear a little bit from him from earlier today on what's next for the longtime, now former coach of the New Orleans Saints.
Honestly, as I sit here today, and this is okay, I don't know what's next. And look, I read the reports and I understand. I've not spoken to anyone from a media outlet relative to doing television or radio. Maybe that opportunity arises, but every time I read something that says like he's in line for this job, I'll call my agent Don and I'll say, Don, did you hear something? Because I have not heard anything, and that's okay. I think I'd like to do that. I think I'd be pretty good at it. But so stepping outside, like in the cold weather today, and being a little uncomfortable professionally or from a career standpoint is okay. I don't like the word retirement. Mr. B didn't like it either. He always said, retirement's overrated. We get sold this whole image of retirement by these investment groups on TV and golf courses and retirement. And so, I still have a vision for doing things in football. And I'll be honest with you, that might be coaching again at some point. I don't think it's this year. I think maybe in the future, but that's not where my heart is right now. It's not at all.
Let's go into TV, Charean. Here's the reality. If he's thinking about coaching again, he won't be as good as he would be if he were truly done coaching. Unless he throws caution to the wind and says, I don't care if this creates issues for me with future players, with future general managers, with future owners. I'm going to say what I believe, and if somebody has a problem with that, well, then that's their problem, not mine. I'm doing my job right now to the best of my ability, and I'm being honest and authentic with the audience. Biggest problem with John Gruden, even though he was widely praised for his work as the Monday Night Football analyst, I always thought he was not nearly as good as he should have been or could have been, and he wasn't doing a service to the audience because he was always very flowery about everything because he didn't want to complicate his life when he did come back. If he had a guy on the team that he had criticized at some point, he's got to deal with that. Or he's got an owner that he said something about the team, said something about the fan base, something, anything. So if you always skew toward positive and never truly say what you think, you never have to worry about those issues. So Gruden wasn't as good as he could have been, wasn't what I thought he was going to be. Payton has the chance to be great if he decides to worry about whatever complications his current words may cause later at that later date and not allow it to restrain him in any way from speaking his mind. We'll see whether or not he does that in whatever capacity he takes if he does end up in the media, Charean.
You know, the one owner, Mike, who doesn't have a problem with words, that would be Jerry Jones. I don't think that would stop Jerry Jones from hiring him no matter what Sean Payton says. As we know, Jerry likes to speak his mind as well. So I do think his next stop is Dallas. I don't think it's this year. I think it's after this year, whether that's next year or the year after. But I think this puts a whole lot of heat on Mike McCarthy right now going into the 2022 season, if he indeed remains as the head coach of the Cowboys. But I would expect Jerry Jones to call Sean Payton pretty quickly, if they haven't talked already, to talk about what might be in the future for Sean Payton in Dallas.
And see, Charean, I look at it this way. If that's what you're going to do a year from now, just do it now. And he may need a year off to recharge and refocus. And, you know, he said he wants to get in shape. And I remember he did that. He threw himself into that. He was in great shape. He was doing the, what's that word, CrossFit stuff back in 2012. But why prolong it for a year if you know that's where it's going, if you have a conversation at some point with Jerry Jones, unless everybody just decides to put a pin in it for a year. But still, it's going to hover over Mike McCarthy, like you said. It's going to be unavoidable for him in 2022, regardless of whether it's ever brought up at a press conference, regardless of whether it's ever reported. He's smart enough to know that this is something that will be an issue because there has been that connection. There has been that speculation.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.